the late 1980s, a single man was responsible for nearly 80% of the cocaine smuggled into the United States. He was a man who became so wealthy that he appeared on the Forbes list of international billionaires for 7 years in a row. He owned a private zoo, a fleet of planes, and a luxury prison that he built for himself. But he was also a man who turned his home country into a war zone, ordering the deaths of thousands of people, including presidential candidates, judges, and innocent civilians. This is the story of Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine, a figure who remains a polarizing symbol of both Robin Hood-like charity and unimaginable narco-terrorism. To understand how a street thief from Medellín transformed into the most powerful criminal in history, we have to look at the intersection of extreme ambition, a failing political system, and the global explosion of a white powder that changed the world forever. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born in 1949 in the small town of Rionegro, Colombia, as the third of 7 children. His father was a humble farmer and his mother was a schoolteacher. Despite his modest beginnings, Pablo's ambition was visible early on. He often told his friends that he would be a millionaire by the time he was 22. His criminal career started small, allegedly stealing headstones from graveyards to sand them down and resell them to new mourners. He soon graduated to car theft and kidnapping, learning the street-level mechanics of power and intimidation in the city of Medellín. However, his life changed when he realized that the profit margins on marijuana were nothing compared to the burgeoning market for cocaine. The logistics of the Medellín cartel were a masterpiece of illegal engineering. Escobar realized that the key to success was not just the product, but the delivery. He bought a private island in the Bahamas called Norman's Key, which served as a refueling station and a hub for his fleet of planes. These planes were often modified to carry massive amounts of cocaine hidden in the wings or the landing gear. At the height of his power, Escobar was moving 15 tons of cocaine every single day. The economics of his operation were staggering. We can look at the scale of his wealth through a simple financial lens. If we consider his peak net worth of approximately $30 billion in 1990 and adjust it for inflation to 2026 values, the number is nearly incomprehensible. The wealth was so vast that Escobar reportedly spent $2,500 every month just on rubber bands to hold his stacks of cash together. He also famously lost about 10% of his wealth every year to spoilage, which in his world meant that rats were literally eating his money in the warehouses where it was stored. Escobar knew that money alone wasn't enough to secure his position. He needed the support of the people. He began a massive public works program, building houses, soccer fields, and schools in the poorest neighborhoods of Medellín. To the marginalized people who had been ignored by the Colombian government for decades, Pablo was a savior. They called him Don Pablo and viewed him as a modern-day Robin Hood. This popular support provided him with an army of loyal lookouts and informants who would die before betraying him. However, his attempt to legitimize his power by entering politics was his undoing. In 1982, he was elected as an alternate member of the Colombian Chamber of Representatives. But when the Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, publicly exposed his criminal background on the floor of Congress, Escobar was forced to resign. He responded by ordering the assassination of Bonilla, sparking a decade of open warfare against the state. The strategy Escobar employed was known as Plata o Plomo, which translates to silver or lead. If a government official or a police officer could not be bought with a bribe, they were killed. This was not just a threat, it was a reality that decimated the Colombian judicial system. Escobar's reign of terror reached a fever pitch in the late 1980s. He was responsible for the bombing of Avianca Flight 203, which killed 107 people because he believed a presidential candidate was on board. He also ordered the bombing of the DAS building in Bogotá, which leveled an entire city block. These acts of violence turned the international community against him, and the United States became obsessed with his extradition. Escobar's fear of a U.S. prison was his greatest weakness. He famously said that he would rather have a grave in Colombia than a cell in the United States. In 1991, in a bizarre turn of events, he agreed to surrender to the Colombian authorities, but only on his own terms. He negotiated a deal where he would be imprisoned in a facility he built himself, known as La Catedral. This was no ordinary prison. It featured a soccer field, a giant dollhouse for his daughter, a bar, and a waterfall. From within these walls, Escobar continued to run his empire, even murdering his own associates inside the prison when he suspected them of stealing. When the government finally decided to move him to a real military prison, Escobar simply walked out the back door and went back into hiding. The final hunt for Pablo Escobar was a collaboration between the Colombian Search Bloc, the US DEA, and a mysterious vigilante group known as Los Pepes. Los Pepes was composed of rival cartel members and victims of Escobar's violence who used the same brutal methods as Pablo to destroy his organization. They burned his properties and killed his lawyers and associates, slowly stripping away his protection. By 1993, Escobar was a broken man, moving from one safe house to another with only a few bodyguards. He was so desperate to keep his family warm while hiding in the mountains that he reportedly burned $2 million in cash just to start a fire. On December 2, 1993, the day after his 44th birthday, the search block tracked Escobar to a middle-class neighborhood in Medellín. He was located by triangulating a radio signal from a phone call he made to his son. As the soldiers stormed the house, Escobar and his bodyguard fled across the rooftops. In a hail of gunfire, the king of cocaine was finally brought down. To this day, his family maintains that he committed suicide by shooting himself in the ear, the exact spot he always told them he would aim for to avoid being taken alive. The images of the Colombian police smiling over his bloodied body became a global sensation, signaling the end of an era. The legacy of Pablo Escobar is still visible in Colombia today, both in the scars of the survivors and in the physical landscape. Perhaps the strangest remnant of his reign is the population of hippopotamuses that now roam the Colombian countryside. Originally part of his private zoo at Hacienda Nápoles, the animals escaped after his death and have become the largest invasive species on the planet. They are a living, breathing metaphor for the uncontrollable and destructive nature of his influence. While the Netflix series Narcos has introduced his story to a new generation, many Colombians feel the show glamorizes a man who destroyed their country. The reality of Escobar was not a cinematic adventure, it was a tragedy that left thousands of families broken and a nation struggling to reclaim its reputation. Understanding Pablo Escobar requires us to look past the stacks of money and the dramatic escapes. He was a product of a specific time and place, a man who exploited the global demand for narcotics and the systemic inequalities of his homeland. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the devastating cost of a life built on violence. Even as his name fades into history, the lessons of his rise and fall remain more relevant than ever. Thank you for exploring the dark and complex history of Pablo Escobar with me today. If this deep dive into the Medellín cartel and the Plata o Plomo era gave you a better understanding of one of history's most notorious figures, please hit the like button. It helps our community of history enthusiasts grow and ensures that these important scientific and historical stories keep reaching people. Do you think the pop culture fascination with figures like Escobar is harmful, or is it a necessary way to remember history? Let me know in the comments below, as I am very interested to hear your perspective on the ethics of narco media. If you want to keep exploring the mysteries of the past and the mechanics of human history, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. Until next time, stay healthy, stay curious, and always move forward.